Welcome to this video. In the last video we have set up ng OpenAPI gen configuration right here. Now it's time to really execute that command to generate our client-side API code. So let's go ahead and do that. On the right side, go to client app folder, right click and then open in terminal. Now we're inside of that client app folder and we can run npm commands again. So now call npx ng-openapi-gen. Hit run. You may have noticed that we used npx and not npm, and npx is also a CLI tool, just like npm, whose purpose it is to make it easy to install and manage dependencies hosted in the npm registry. So with npm you can install packages, and with npx, X stands for execution, you can execute packages, so run them. Now take a look and tell me what you can see here. Error on API generation from HTTPS localhost, right? So he has an error, he cannot download the file. So why is that happening? That's very easy to explain. He cannot create a connection to download that file because our server is not running. So let's start our server again. It's running in the background right now. Click on the right side in the Solution Explorer, right click and then open in terminal again to bring up the PowerShell here. Simply press the arrow key up and then npx ng-openapi-gen again. And now let's see what's happening. As you can see, some files are getting created here, right? So he created API module, base service, and some other stuff. So now you can see that the generation was finished with 2 models and 1 service. Now let's shut down the server. Let's go ahead and inspect what we have now created. In client app folder, open source, app, and then you can see a new folder here, which is called API. Now inside that new API folder, we now have a lot of structure, which is basically code for connecting from Angular to our REST API, then getting data back and directly creating real objects from it. So JSON parsing, right? Because our REST API is responding with JSON information and it will automatically get parsed or converted from JSON into TypeScript thanks to that client app that we have just created with a single command call. Now open up the models folder, for example, and take a look at flight RM and time place RM, right? I guess you can see what's happening here. So he just took a look at our C# class. So he just took a look at the JSON information he received and then built upon that information this interface. Now in our Angular project we already have a flight read model and a time place read model, right? So now, as I earlier said when we created that interfaces, we will later remove them and let our client-side package handle this. So we will now remove some information and implement that client API here instead. Yeah, if you want to have more information, for example, check the API configuration file. You can see that here, API configuration, there's a root URL, which is pointing to our local host, which is our PC, and then the port for the ASP.NET Core application on the secure port, right? So HTTPS 7208, which is our ASP.NET backend API. So our front end is now referencing the backend of our backend API. So let me just give you one sentence on what happened here. In Angular, in our project right here, we now have a service which we can use to inject it. So this is very similar to ASP.NET Core dependency injection, right? So the package that we have used to generate that client API is providing us a service that we can now use inside of our Angular project anywhere we'd like to start using our API. We will get through all of this, but I'm just talking about that service. On the right side, you can see it here, service.ts. This is exactly what I'm talking about, that flight service here. We can use it and it will automatically point to our flight service RESTful endpoints. Now that said, let's start implementing our automatically generated client API in Angular.